we go. We have two co-authors. As you know, Dan and I have spent many years studying many aspects of business and management in Russia. And we are very interested in innovation, as so many of us are here in the DMSB. What we have been doing recently is working with Lauren Graham, who is Professor Emeritus of the History of Technology at MIT, and his specific contribution, his reputation is on science and technology in the Soviet Union. And Dan Zatinsky has been working in this field, being a business consultant with Russia for the past 25 years. And Dan and I have known both these gentlemen for a couple of decades. This Dan Zatinsky is a graduate of our law school here at Northeastern. Well, with regard to what's going on in Russia, we are wondering about the historical barriers to innovation. Why has Russia been so much of a laggard when it has great potential? We know there's a huge number of scientists, engineers who have actually emigrated from Russia because they've been frustrated by the lack of opportunities to actually innovate in the country. Nonetheless, the Putin government has developed a number of initiatives to promote innovation, particularly commercialization of technology in Russia, to make the country more internationally competitive. So there's been a lot of money that has been put into innovation. For instance, there's a $5 billion nanotechnology fund, and there are a couple of local firms, Massachusetts firms in Cambridge, that have received some funds from the Russian government for nanotechnology because they have partnered with Russian firms, and they have agreed that within the next few years they plan to actually set up manufacturing facilities in the pharma industry over in St. Petersburg. All right, so we have a lot of commitment by the Russian government. We look at innovation from the institutional theory lens, and what we note is that it's particularly useful in evaluating business and management in emerging economies because of the institutional weaknesses in such areas as IP, which was just mentioned in the previous presentation. And so informal institutions have filled that void, and these are barriers to innovation in Russia because of some historical influences, informal things such as Russian culture and how innovation has been stunted over the centuries. A couple of them are, the result has been Russians are known for great inventions. They have a traditional strength in the basic scientists and product development. They haven't commercialized things, and yet, I lived in the Soviet Union for a year back between my MBA and my PhD. And the Russian managers I studied with every day kept telling me these stories about how Russians invented the light bulb, and they invented the steam engine, etc. And I'm going, whoa, wait a minute now. Turns out it's true, but they never commercialized them. All right, Dan, come on up, please. And, oh yeah, you're on.
Great. Thank you, Sheila. Yeah, you can see how the paper broke down. Sheila and I are really the theorists, and we do a lot on institutional theory, and that's the theoretical basis behind the paper. This paper will be published in Thunderbird International Business Review soon, we hope, accepted anyway, but long used at every journal at this point. But the Russians have been traditionally great at invention, poor at innovation. If we look around Northeastern, you will see a lot of Russian scientists around. And if you look at I think it was this morning, in the innovation on our webpage, and see who the people are. Kim Lewis is Russian, and one of the other labs is also Russian. There are an awful lot of Russian mathematicians and scientists here, and in most U.S. universities, I think the number is 200,000 emigres from Russia in science and engineering who are operating in the United States, and Sheila mentioned why. This presentation will give you some of the ideas why. It's so difficult to be able to bring your ideas to fruition. You can invent and literally in Lauren Graham's, who's the historian of the group, his work. He's got a couple of books out, and the one just came out, MIT Press, I'm pretty sure. And they did invent, early invention of the steam engine, of the light bulb, trying to think of other major laser, so things of this nature, but they're never commercialized. And Russia is very good at invention and terrible at commercialization. It has not changed very much, actually, till now. But I mentioned a few of the things that want. Do you want to give the clicker?
Why don't I do it? Do you mind if I just stand back
I
there
love
and
it.
do it?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not good because I have to do it.
Good, appreciate it. Yeah, so some of the, we move from the history, and the paper really covers a bit about the history and the barriers. And the barriers we saw as institutional barriers. The Russian government influences everything. It is omnipresent. We use the triple helix model. And the triple helix model, basically, if you're familiar with innovation, is the government and universities and industry. And the trouble with, as we have one schematic in the paper, the great big circle is the government. And the two small circles are industry and the university. The government overwhelms all other attempts. Now, the changes in the institution, because of Putin and Medvedev in the middle of the Putin administrations, yeah, he was there. Putin's down with his really fourth administration and all reality. But they really have been trying to do something about innovation. They'd like to do it. Top down is usually death to innovation, and that's the way they do it because that's the way the Russians do things. It's got to be big. It's got to be top down. They attempt to create an ecosystem through developing a formal institutional infrastructure which never existed. The idea of that formal institutional infrastructure is to create an environment for entrepreneurship. Imagine that here at Northeastern. Entrepreneurship. And it's to try to translate the invention into some aspect of commercialization and then into companies. Russia has a terrible history of entrepreneurship. Obviously, it was outlawed for 70 years in the Communist administration. So, Sheila mentioned the investment restructured, including the government, agencies, universities, and company involvement. They have changed the upper echelons of the university system so that they have designated certain universities as major research universities. They are coupled with they are located in areas where they are close to companies, and they're trying to develop the clusters that we talk about. That cluster would be the university and the company, but then we have government, the third leg of the triple helix, and unfortunately, the federal government continues to dictate the terms, to call, to make the major decisions, and as you said, that's usually anathema to innovation. So our conclusion at the end is a mixed bag. They are developing a formal infrastructure to replace the informal infrastructure that Sheila mentioned a while ago, because the informality does not do it without some sort of support. And the informal system in Russia did not have the support, but it was better than the formal system, which actually didn't exist. So now there's a formal system beginning to exist, but the trouble with the formal system is it really needs the informal system to support it. It needs the culture to be changed. It needs the values of people to become in sync with innovation, and that is beginning to happen somewhat. But Dan Satinsky is our kind of man on the ground there. Again, the fourth author on the paper, and Dan gets there often. Sheila's got there a couple of times a year to Russia, and recently Dan gets there for long periods of time in the regions as well as in Moscow. Most of what we hear about is in Moscow, maybe St. Petersburg. Dan gets out to the regions, and there's a lot happening in the various regions, and that's where some of these universities are that have been designated by the Ministry of Education. There's a lot of infighting in the upper echelons of the educational system. The educational ministry has lost a lot of power. The designation of these new universities is really threatening the old research. All research was done at research institutes, not universities. Now we have research universities. So again, you can picture the infighting among the formal institutions that are hopefully going to make a change in the company's success. because there hasn't been much to date. But at least they are trying, they're working on some of the right things, but there's a big, big puzzle for innovation and entrepreneurship as we try to see around our own campus here, and they are trying to do it on a national basis. There's a lot written, there's good literature developing on national innovation, national programs of innovation and such now, and this is our contributions, hopefully looking at solving some of the problems that have existed in the emerging economies. Are we done?
I think we're pretty much done.
I think I've already finished that. Okay? Good. Gone long enough. Thanks very much.
Thank you.